chciałbym z całego serca podziękować Instytutowi Etnologii i Antropologii Kulturowej tego Uniwersytetu na zaproszenie na ten wykład. Niestety ten wykład będzie po angielsku. Przepraszam. Ale mam nadzieję, że ten wykład będzie po polsku następnym razem, jak będę w Warszawie. Trzymamy kciuki. Dobrze. This lecture discusses the notion of building in contemporary Poland, and especially the ways it is drawn upon in the discourses of governing institutions. The last few years have seen increased interest in anthropology and cognate disciplines in infrastructure, materiality, and building. What unites many studies on these issues is a focus on the forms of political rationality that underlie technological projects, as well as in the emotional investments that they generate. Yet central to some of such studies is also the idea that this project should be studied not so much as technical facts, but rather as social facts or aesthetic vehicles producing symbolic meanings. My interest in this lecture is not just in built forms and in the association between buildings and a specific political system, but particularly in building as an integral part of a discursive practice. An important aspect one needs to keep in mind when conducting research in Poland is that ever since the 1980s, Poles have been exposed to a wide range of slogans and political messages communicating completely different values, namely those associated with socialism and those emanating from the political forces that came to the fore after the Cold War. Most of the people in this room know, probably much better than I do, that the period between 2004 and 2007 was a turning point for most of the European countries of the former socialist bloc joined the European Union. One of the consequences of this transformation was the consolidation and subsequent rise to power of political forces with a neoliberal agenda. Now, in the context of these developments, national governments have to reconcile two tasks. On the one hand, they have to follow the directives of international and supranational agencies. On the other hand, they have to legitimate themselves and appeal to people. Gaining legitimacy is, of course, a complex process, and it's not my intention to explore all the ways in which this is accomplished. I will simply say, for the purposes of this lecture, that an essential component of self-legitimation is the use of a rhetoric, of a political language, of concepts, which can appeal to most citizens, irrespective of class, gender, and locality. One concept that mediates Poles' encounters with the post-socialist state is the idea of building, budować. The concept has played a significant role in slogans such as "We are building Poland," "Budujemy Polskę," deployed by the Polish government when promoting large-scale projects funded by the EU, such as the construction of roads or the improvement of infrastructures. The same idea has played a central role in political rhetoric too. In his successful 2010 presidential campaign, Bronisław Komorowski availed himself of the slogan "Unity builds, Zgoda buduje," when he promised the construction of a united, conflict-free society in the face of political divisions within Polish society. Later on, the concept became incorporated in the slogan Poland under construction, Polska w budowie, And this figured prominently in the electoral materials produced by Civic Platform in 2011, which illustrated what the party had accomplished and what it was planning to achieve. Yet the emphasis on building is not entirely new, for it brings to mind the time when the socialist state was promoting the construction of a new society, as well as the physical reconstruction of Polish cities in the aftermath of World War II. In this sense, who builds and what place the idea of building occupies in the collective imagination may be important factors for people to make sense of the changes that Poland underwent after the end of the Cold War. Yet we need to make a distinction. On the one hand, building may be part of the process through which the new post-socialist state, post-socialist order takes material form, and through which the material traces of socialism are removed. On the other hand, discourses about building may also be what Douglas Holmes has called representational practices of which governing institutions avail themselves. Thus, this analysis raises the issue of how far building as a material process serves to inscribe the new political order onto the built environment, and what building as a discursive practice is about. In an attempt to provide at least partial answers to these questions, I will discuss part of the information I collected in the city of Gdańsk in the last few years, and I'm sure you know where Gdańsk is. Most of its inhabitants are well aware of the wide range of meanings attached to the idea of building, given that the city was reduced to rubble and ash during World War II and reconstructed in its aftermath. To a certain extent, the history of Gdańsk is a history of reconstructions, for it has been an object of contention between competing powers ever since it was founded. Gdańsk's physical and cultural landscape has been altered by the many conversions of rule over the city, and the shapes of the urban scenery were often used for political reasons. The Nazis, for example, manipulated Gdańsk's historical legacy in order to demonstrate Germany's supremacy over that part of Europe. Yet the arrival of the Red Army in 1945 signified the almost total destruction of the city center. Even though it was reconstructed, the socialist state attempted to remove the German elements from the urban landscape, and the huge housing blocks and the Soviet military cemetery are testimony of the socialist era. Nowadays, Gdańsk is witnessing a transition from an industrial to a services-dominated economy, and is attempting to redefine itself through culture in an effort to attract tourists, investors, and potential residents. This is revealed particularly by the countless branches of mostly foreign-owned credit and financial institutions that dominate the city center's social scene, and ultimately by the privatization of public space. Gdańsk's incorporation into the political economy of the EU appears in material structures. Several major public works in the historical center are funded by the EU itself, and the revitalization of a city in a state of decay is high on the agenda of the municipal council. Anyone visiting the area would notice that construction is in progress all over the city, and the optimism that the idea of building embodies is highlighted by the promise of future redevelopment of empty spaces. Yet it must also be borne in mind that Gdańsk occupies a central place in Polish history, given that in the 1980s it became the birthplace of Solidarność, solidarity, the mass social movement guided by the principle of labor self-government that questioned the legitimacy of the socialist state. In this sense, transforming the city also entails dealing with its socialist legacies and with solidarity's history. Outside the historical center, an extensive area that will be transformed is that of the shipyard. The shipyard has a complex legacy as simultaneously the embodiment of socialism and the site of dissent. Formerly a German shipyard, after 1945 it became the pride of the Polish state. When it was named after Lenin in 1967, it was meant to be the material form of socialist ideology. As the largest shipbuilding company in the Eastern Bloc, the Gdańsk shipyard was expected to play a key role in the creation of a new working class. Ironically, 3 decades ago, it became the cradle of the Solidarity movement and the location where socialist ideology itself was contested. After the demise of socialism, the shipyard was privatized. However, it was totally unprepared for the challenges posed by free markets, and in 1996 it went bankrupt. Despite this, it is still in operation, but it's much smaller than it was in the socialist era, given that an extensive area no longer devoted to shipbuilding has been acquired by developers. Nowadays, in official discourses, the shipyard is referred to as a monument to Polish freedom, and several state-sponsored ceremonies are held inside it and in the nearby Plac Solidarności. Gate 2, where the movement's leader Lech Wałęsa used to address the crowds during the strike of 1980, has become a tourist attraction and European heritage. The Polish state, too, makes itself visible in the post-industrial landscape of the shipyard. And this is revealed by the spectacular concerts held in connection with the celebration of national anniversaries. The events of June 2009, the 20th anniversary of the first free elections in the country, included performances of Australian pop singer Kylie Minogue and several Polish rock bands. The events also included showings of short documentaries on gigantic screens, which narrated the rise of solidarity in the 1980s and its success in the 1989 elections. Likewise, the events held in the same place in August 2010, the 30th anniversary of the birth of Solidarity, included performances of Polish and foreign singers, as well as speeches of President Bronisław Komorowski and former President Lech Wałęsa. That such performances are adorned with the trappings of national culture is very clear. Spectacular events are common in countries that are witnessing rapid social and economic change and in which the state is endeavoring to legitimate itself. Yet the fact that these performances are held in the shipyard is no accident. They serve to remind Poles that the shipyard is the place where the new post-socialist Poland was born. Despite the shipyard's significance in Polish history, past its main gate, visitors face a scenario of desolation. Several warehouses are abandoned and earmarked for demolition, and huge open spaces are densely overgrown and littered with scrap metal. Those who hold administrative positions in the shipyard refer to it as typically socialist on the grounds that it embodies a socialist legacy. An employee of a governmental organization drew my attention to this aspect by asking, "Don't you think that this place looks socialist?" Implicit in his and other views is the idea that since the shipyard has the legacy of another era, it needs to be transformed, and that epochs should neatly succeed one another in sequential, linear fashion. The fate of the shipyard, and especially of the grounds no longer devoted to shipbuilding, became an object of public debate a few years ago, when the redevelopment of areas in a state of decay became one of the priorities of the municipal council. Since the shipyard grounds to be redeveloped are owned by private developers, the municipal council has limited power to influence decisions as to what should be demolished or preserved. However, because of the association of such grounds with the Solidarity movement, the mayor of Gdańsk made it very clear that the redevelopment project would rely on consensus and cooperation between the municipal council and civil society. At the core of the redevelopment is an attempt to reinvent the area's public image through the construction of an imposing building housing the European Solidarity Center. This stands by Gate 2 and functions as a governmental research institution documenting the activities of opposition movements in Central and Eastern Europe in the late socialist period. Yet the project also involves a comprehensive redesign of the site and the construction of luxury apartments, a shopping mall, a supermarket, and office space. It is tempting to suggest that while the exhibitions in the European Solidarity Center narrate part of this history of Poland's transition from socialism to capitalism, the luxury apartment and shopping mall to be built nearby will diminish material traces of this transition. The municipal council organized several symposia and public meetings in order to let residents express their views on the fate of the post-industrial landscape of the shipyard. While the demolition of most of the buildings dating back to the socialist era had already taken place, there was disagreement as to what to do with the other buildings and cranes. This was particularly the case of the red brick warehouses built when the city was under German rule. The brochure issued by the company in charge of the redevelopment of the site makes it very clear that the initiative has three main goals. To commemorate the labor unrest of 1980, to cast the area as a microcosm of Polish history, and ultimately to highlight the country's transition from a socialist to a free market economy that was made possible by the rise of solidarity. However, the company has already demolished the buildings, including historic buildings that were not considered of economic value. By contrast, the Solidarity trade union that lays claims to the legacy of the social movement remains opposed to the redevelopment of the shipyard on the grounds that it should become national heritage. Finally, groups of artists and intellectuals have tried to engage the residents of Gdańsk in discussions about the shipyard's legacies and have petitioned the municipal council to preserve the oldest buildings and cranes as industrial heritage. The Municipal Council also organized various photographic exhibitions that threw into relief the shipyard state of decay. Yet the purpose of these and other related initiatives was not to make the residents of Gdańsk aware of a situation they already knew very well, or to involve them in the decision-making process. They were simply meant to influence public opinion as to the necessity to redevelop the area. The identification of ruins or empty space that don't have economic value, for example, was designed to legitimate land privatization and real estate speculation. In this sense, despite the shipyard's significance in Polish recent history, its redevelopment is not meant to reconstruct the past. Rather, it will obliterate most of it and will make the site accessible only to those who have the financial capital to buy property there. That most of these initiatives are profit-oriented is very clear. Scholars such as David Harvey and Cheryl Zakin have shown that the creation of spectacular urban spaces and the redevelopment of historic neighborhoods serve to attract capital and potential residents. In this sense, what is happening in Gdańsk brings to mind initiatives undertaken in other parts of Central and Eastern Europe, and in contexts where the authenticity of historic places becomes available only to those who possess the cultural and financial capital. In the context of these developments, the Gdańsk shipyard faces a dilemma, namely how to regulate construction and renovation in order to be economically viable, and how to preserve its historic character. Although the shipyard was expected to become the principal material emblem of the mayor's policies, eventually it became a contested object of planning. The several state-sponsored ceremonies held in Gdańsk gave factory workers opportunity to contest the redevelopment project, as well as the Polish state neoliberal agenda. People expressed their discontent in June 2009 when the grounds outside the shipyard became the scenario of the celebrations of the 20th anniversary of the first free elections in the country. In the course of the event, shipyard workers, angered at the European Commission's pressures to have the shipyard closed down and at the Polish state compliance with these requests, made their voice heard. They hang a big banner beside Gate 2, which read, in English, "Dictator from the East has not destroyed our shipyard. Now Brussels officials play the cards." Indeed. Indeed.
Was that you?
I was just taking the picture. As I said at the beginning of this lecture, between 2010 and 2011, both the Polish state and the civic platform made extensive use of slogans such as "We are building Poland" and "Poland under construction." However, most of the people I talked to said that they were largely indifferent to such slogans. To them, they were simply hasła, namely empty words, and were reminiscent of those circulated by the socialist state in the past. Yet, this attitude did not result in people's withdrawal from politics, nor did it mirror indifference to the consequences that building may have on their lives. Many workers who participated in the strikes in the 1980s and became the victims of the economic reforms introduced in the 1990s joined several demonstrations to voice their dismay at the policies implemented by the Polish state and the municipal council. Building stirred up anger when it became clear that the EU funding for large-scale works would decrease after the conclusion of Euro 2012, and that the optimism of politicians about Poland's economic future had to be taken with a pinch of salt. Popular anger reached its peak a few months before the beginning of Euro 2012, when the mayor of Gdańsk contemplated the idea of turning some landmarks associated with the history of solidarity into heritage. One of these is Gate 2. The shipyards being regarded as the symbolic terrain where many Poles articulate their relationship to the Polish nation and national history as a history of martyrdom is indicated by the Polish flag and the vases of flowers that hang onto the gate. The Vatican flag and the pictures of John Paul II and the Black Madonna of Częstochowa, in turn, highlight the connection between national identity and Roman Catholicism. In 1967, the shipyard was named after Lenin, and until 1990, it bore a dedication to the socialist leader over Gate 2. In May 2012, the mayor, with the backing of municipal and regional conservators, pushed for the return of the Lenin dedication. Behind this initiative was the idea that restoring the original Cold War appearance of Gate 2 would help turn the area into a protected heritage site. Moreover, the mayor stated that the initiative was also designed to make young people aware of the shipyards having been the cradle of the revolution that led to the final collapse of the Leninist political project. Despite the mayor's efforts to endow the plan with an aura of legitimacy, the initiative stirred up nationalist feelings among members of the Solidarity trade union who fiercely opposed it. A few days after the dedication had been reinstated, someone covered it with the logo of Solidarity. Then over 100 people staged an anti-government protest in front of the gate by throwing eggs at photographs of Lenin and of then Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Meanwhile, the economic crisis had significant repercussions in Gdańsk too, given that the project of the redevelopment of the shipyard had not yet attracted the hoped-for investments. While such investments were conditional on the existence of a road linking the shipyard site to the town centre, it was also clear that the expenditure of public funds was necessary for the construction of such a road. As it turned out that construction works would drain the funds that in the past had been allocated to social programs and cultural initiatives, a barrage of complaints was aimed at the municipal council about the problems that the upcoming works would cause. Meanwhile, the Solidarity trade union started collecting signatures for a referendum to recall the mayor. Opposition to his building project was expressed by a variety of posters produced by the trade union's Committee for the Deposition of the Mayor of Gdańsk that were plastered across the city. One of them depicted images of Lenin and of the mayors being thrown into a large litter bin and bore the heading, "We don't want Illich and Adamowicz. Nie chcemy Illicza I Adamowicza." While the collection of signatures was in progress, a shipyard worker took the initiative to remove the dedication to Lenin from Gate 2. Because the removal was not authorized, both the municipal council and the shipyard's administration decided to press charges against the man. However, the dedication was promptly returned to the shipyard administration. and therefore the damage charges were dropped, and because of the fierce opposition encountered, the mayor decided not to reinstate the dedication. Soon afterwards, the Lenin dedication ceased to be a topic of conversation. Yet the dismay the project had caused sparked a debate not only about the mayor, but also about post-socialist transformations in the city. The debate became particularly heated in early 2013 when the shipyard saw the beginning of the long-awaited road construction works. While such works did not involve bulldozing existing dwellings, they generated much anxiety among the factory workers and their families living in the apartment blocks next to the shipyard. More importantly, they alerted them to the possibility that their houses be targeted by investors for renewal. As soon as the wars commenced, some local cultural institutions organized a series of meetings with the families residing in the neighborhood. Such meetings were meant to provide explanations as to what the works would involve, and to reassure residents that construction works would not have any negative impact on the local community. Such explanations failed to convince most of the people I came across and evoked nationalist sentiments. Some seized the opportunity to criticize the mayor on the grounds that he only pursues the interests of the so-called developers mafia, mafia developerska. Yet works commenced when the economic crisis started biting Poland. Therefore, while many people were worried about the possibility of gentrification of the area, others instead expressed the concern that such works would never come to completion. In this respect, some of my respondents remarked that the promises of a better future made by the mayor and the Polish state, expressed by the slogan, "We are building Poland," were mere propaganda. As such, they could not be taken seriously. One of these people made the comment, "It's just like in Gdańsk's time, tak jak Zapierka." The man's reference to Gdańsk's era is not accidental. It was a reminder of the fact that despite its initial success, the economic policy Gdańsk undertook in the 1970s failed. In this sense, the ambitious economic plans undertaken by the civic platform-led government 3-4 decades later were interpreted through the memories of the 1970s. It seems arguable then that the legacies of socialism form the background against which the post-socialist state and its policies are understood. "We are building Poland" and other similar slogans then were inserted into broader national narratives of protest and resistance. Despite such complaints, works did not stop. Ever since the construction of the European Solidarity Centre started, media coverage of the redevelopment of the shipyard has been very extensive. Both national and local newspapers published several computer rendering images illustrating the plans to redevelop the shipyard, and played a significant role in communicating such plans to the public. Some of these even describe the project as the first step of the transformation that will turn Gdańsk into a vibrant European metropolis. The project received even more publicity when the municipal council announced the competition for the development of the landscaping concept of a promenade crossing the shipyard. Yet, visions and plans don't always translate into built realities. When the redevelopment project was conceived, it was largely driven by the optimism deriving from the flow of global capital into Poland after its EU accession. Since the economic crisis has made potential investors cautious, what the shipyard will look like in the future is hard to predict. The project became the target of sharp criticism when the Municipal Council announced that the construction of the European Solidarity Centre would take longer than planned, and that its official opening would be postponed by 3 months. Moreover, the construction of the road connecting the shipyard and the city centre resulted in the demolition of several warehouses dating back to the late 19th century. Thus, by the time these works came to an end, most of the shipyard site was reduced to a pile of rubble, and the grounds surrounding the European Solidarity Centre were empty. The project was further criticized when it turned out that the new road had been built very close to historic housing blocks, and that its construction was the execution of a plan conceived in the socialist era. The fate of the shipyard became once again an issue of heated debate in August 2014 during the official opening of the European Solidarity Centre. One of the distinguished guests invited to give a speech was President Bronisław Komorowski, who described the shipyard site as a special place with an extraordinary architecture. Yet, when he referred to it as the gate to Polish freedom, some members of the Solidarity Trade Union started shouting, "Cheaters, thieves." In doing so, they contested not only the redevelopment project, but also the notion of freedom, built on market and pluralist principles, that is advocated by the Polish state and the municipal council. Such feelings were expressed particularly by 2 banners, which read in Polish, "Enough with hypocrisy," and "There is no freedom." Eventually, the grievances of the residents of Gdańsk bore some fruit. A committee of citizens, which included, among others, Lech Wałęsa and the director of the European Solidarity Centre, petitioned President Komorowski to protect the shipyard from further damage and turn it into a cultural park. Komorowski, in turn, sent an appeal to the mayor of Gdańsk, saying that the shipyard grounds are a symbol of Polish freedom and that their protection is a moral duty. Meanwhile, the company in charge of the redevelopment sold the shipyard grounds to a Swiss investor, and negotiations between the municipal council and the new owners are in progress. Therefore, what will happen to the shipyard still remains an open question. The information discussed so far brings us back to the issues raised at the outset, most notably to the questions of how far building serves to inscribe the new political order onto the built environment, and what building as a discursive practice is about. As we have seen, the redevelopment of the shipyard is as much about construction as it is about destruction. Reconstructions and redevelopments are not new in Polish history. In a country that had been the theater of conflict, reconstruction had often been functional to the revitalization of communities after a period of crisis, yet they have also served to rewrite local and national history. Gdańsk is no exception. Its reconstruction in the aftermath of World War II and the development of industrial areas were also intended to inscribe a socialist vision of society onto the urban landscape. To some extent, the planned redevelopment of the shipyard site forms part of the same story. It seeks to inscribe the vision of modernity onto an industrial area that has lost most of its function, at the same time as it is meant to remove the physical and discursive traces of socialism. In this sense, while building takes on a material dimension when it is associated with urban development, it may also conjure up the idea of the construction of a new society. Behind the notion of building, as it was conceived by the governing party, was a vision of time as linear and a conceptualization of history as something that does not repeat itself. However, as we have seen, these clash with the ideas shared by those who establish a relationship of historical continuity between the socialist past and the present. It would be tempting to suggest, following James Ferguson, that building is an integral part of a discourse generated by governing institutions to legitimate themselves. Yet, this analysis has revealed that building as a material process is rife with contradictions. What is being demolished is the cradle of the solidarity movement that questioned the legitimacy of the socialist state, and what has just been built had been planned in the socialist era. Meanwhile, more plans are devised and made public, more historic buildings are demolished, and the idea of building remains central to official discourses. It seems arguable, then, that in a context in which the project of state building is increasingly tied to political and moral economies of language, such discourses function chiefly as representational forms that shape expectations and are fully within the neoliberal order and intrinsic to its operation. Dziękuję za uwagę.